Right, it's that time where we look at the stories making headlines in the media from around the world. And we begin with one here in the UK. The tabloid Daily Mirror is among many papers covering Prince Harry breaking his silence about giving up his royal role. Its headline quotes him saying he and his wife Meghan are so sad it has come to this. The Financial Times looks at Libya after world leaders, including Boris Johnson, Vladimir Putin and Angela Merkel, met the country's warring sides. The foreign powers vowed not to interfere after helping broker a ceasefire. One of the top stories on the BBC News app is the rise in the number of people confirmed to have the new mystery virus out of China, and the concern among experts as millions of Chinese people prepare to travel for a national holiday. Another big story from China, covered in the country's Global Times. It's announced a major effort to tackle plastic waste, with plans to ban items including single-use bags and straws. And finally, here in the UK, Hull is looking to become the first city to offer universal basic income. The Guardian reports that it could mean every adult living there would receive between £50 and £100 a week. It's interesting, an experiment that's been done elsewhere. We'll come to that in a moment. With me, Oliver Cornock, who is Editor-in-Chief at the Oxford Business Group. Oliver, we'll start with the Daily Mirror. Quite an extraordinary speech by Prince Harry. A lot more personal, I suppose, than we're used to hearing from the royal family. And do you think maybe setting the tone for what we can expect from Harry and Meghan once they have switched to this new role?
Ben, I think you're spot on. I think this is directly posted to the Instagram account. The full transcript was out there. As you say, a real breakaway from how things have been done in the past. But of course, that's what this is all about, isn't it? This unprecedented shift away, losing the HRH titles. The Queen said last week she would she wanted it sorted within days. And it certainly seems that an initial agreement has been reached pretty damn quickly for a 93-year-old monarch. I'm sure she's surrounded by very good advisors, but this has been a particularly swift and clear break, it seems, on the face of it. However, when you scratch the surface, of course, the details are going to be really quite tricky, I suspect. I mean, just the cost of security, the patronages we hear about, and actually, for the brand of the royal family here in the UK, it is a significant departure.
What was interesting, when you look at the language that Harry used in that speech, it was very much my decision that I have taken for me and my wife. And I suppose the reading between the lines, that was a very sort of pointed hitting back at the suggestion that somehow this has been driven by Meghan and that he has kind of been dragged along with it. It's sort of, he's trying to put paid to that suggestion.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And it's very clear that personalisation of the message was there to underline that. Of course, Meghan has come under a huge amount of strain, I suspect, on this. And, you know, as a husband, I suspect that's what you would want to be doing. But it also sends a very clear message, doesn't it, that he's quite a strong individual, that he wants to carve this new path out. And perhaps this me, is part of that.
I've no doubt that will be in the papers for many days to come. So let's put that to one side for the moment. The Financial Times looks at the situation in Libya. It's having a big effect on the oil price. I was just having a look a moment ago. It's up more than 1%, a barrel of crude at $65.65. And this is because of what's going on in Libya.
Yes, so this Berlin brokered, this Angela Merkel brokered conference that took place has come up with initial plans. There's no real agreement there. It's laying the groundwork for what is hoped to be a UN-sponsored peace process. Interestingly, it's Germany taking the initiative here because recently, remember, it was only 10 days ago that Moscow was hosting a conference here with the rival factions. This civil war that Libya has been plunged into has been hugely damaging. It's also led to the pathway for so many refugees that have entered Germany. So it's quite an important domestic issue for Germany as well. But when you think of the importance of the oil story that you started with there, Ben, of course, one of the leaders of the rival factions there, General Haftar, just as this agreement was discussed, managed to turn off 800,000 barrels a day of oil. This is not a story that's going to go away very quickly. And of course, any true peace will begin with a ceasefire, and that's yet to happen.
But it's interesting that the foreign powers have said they will limit their interference or their involvement in this whole situation?
Yes, it's extremely strong. There is no chance of military solution, according to Angela Merkel. And of course, that plays to the simple empirical fact that every time foreign powers have been involved in these post-Arab Spring conflict zones, things have spiralled out of control.
Let's turn to a story that's very prominent on the BBC News app at the moment. The fears around this new virus is said to be a bit like pneumonia. They're calling it coronavirus and affecting China.
Yes, and although I read there's been 1 or 2 confirmed cases now in Japan, so it does seem to be spreading. Of course, with a story like this from China, you have to sometimes ask some questions about the figures, the transparency around sort of health stories like this. But it's a serious worry, not least because China's heading into the Lunar New Year, where millions of people will travel back home to families. Unless you know how this virus is spread, millions of people moving about, public transport, and this could be something that could grow quite significantly. Apparently, they've deciphered the DNA of this virus, and one hopes, therefore, that perhaps they'll be able to understand better how to treat it. But at the moment, the spread isn't even understood.
Meanwhile, the Global Times covering another story from China, trying to deal with the problem of plastic pollution and some pretty ambitious targets they've set out.
Well, hugely ambitious targets. I mean, some of the figures, though, Ben, in 2016, the delivery industry in China alone used 14.7 million plastic bags. I thought this was an interesting story because we so often hear that China's sort of the world's second largest economy, producing so many pollutants. Yet actually, this is quite ambitious goals, aren't they? As you rightly point out, incremental over 2020, 2022. The hospitality industry. Fascinating story. One of the angles on this, China's largest rubbish dump, which is the equivalent of 100 football pitches, is already full 25 years early.
I mean, stuff like that is incredibly concerning. And the other aspect of it, the plastic imports that, I mean, China has for a long time accepted other countries' plastic waste to process it and deal with it. And they're saying, actually, you know, enough, no more.
Enough, yep. And the technology around converting some of that non-biodegradable waste in the past doesn't seem to be keeping pace with the use, which of course is really alarming because from a business point of view, one hopes that there's a really positive angle there, but it's clear it's not going to come soon enough for the environment.
This is quite an interesting story in The Guardian from the UK. Hull asking to be the first UK city to trial universal basic income. Just unpick that for us. What do they mean?
Well, this is a really interesting angle. This is every single person in this city, regardless of their income level, will get a fixed income on a monthly basis between £50 and £100. Quite controversial. It was part of the Labour Party manifesto in the recent British general election, and it was something that John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, the Treasurer here in the UK, was really championing. Interestingly, though, this Hull's council has come up with this idea, and it's been backed by Conservative members of the council as well. Hull's quite a forward-thinking city as well. It comes out for a bit of stick here in the UK. It's got a bit of a funny reputation, but in 2017 it was UK City of Culture. It led on that, an amazing year. I just wonder whether this pilot scheme could work, because in Finland, where it was trialled, it was very successful. It raised people much happier with a basic income, but crucially, they weren't any more employable. If the jobs aren't there, people aren't employable. I think there has to be perhaps a halfway house here, because employment and productivity are those core bits of the economy here in the UK, and they're still not solved. And I'm not sure, reading through this, that this is going to answer that.
I mean, work and productivity are core bits of the economy as it stands now. But I think certainly the Finland experiment that you referred to, one of the motivators behind that was to start rethinking the whole notion of work, because with so many jobs being replaced by robots and automation, actually there may not be in the future the jobs available for people to do, and people will still need money to live.
At the same time, though, Ben, I couldn't agree with you more. The gig economy, people are doing 5 or 6 jobs now that aren't necessarily on the government's books. I think this needs to be it certainly needs to be considered, but part of a much broader look at how we assess productivity and employment.
And just briefly, it's Blue Monday, supposedly the gloomiest day of the year, the third Monday in January. what's the one thing you do to lift your mood when it's cold and dark and grey?
Do you know what? I go outside, even if it's dark, have a run when it's particularly cold at the moment in the UK. Went for a run last night, had to go to bed nice and early, and you know what? I slept extremely well.
Excellent. I thought you meant you went for a run before coming in. And for those of you who are not in the UK, Oliver came in to join us at 4:30 this morning. So, Oliver, thanks for sharing that with us. Good to see you. And thank you. Stay with us here on BBC News. Plenty more to come throughout the day.